Love music, live sport. Pole Position with Andy Alston and Adam Todd on RockSport Radio.
Hello and welcome to Pole Position, the motorsport show here on RockSport Radio. It's Andy Alston with you alongside Adam Todd, broadcasting live on DAB digital radio across central Scotland, online and on TuneIn. And on the show this week, Gasly on the move as F1 gets back in the groove. Can Marquez take victory at the British GP? We look ahead to all the thrills at Knock Hill, and Tanak at the double with Ogier in trouble. All this and more on Pole Position. Now, Formula 1 returns after the summer break this weekend with the action heading to Belgium for the 13th round of the season. Lewis Hamilton leads the way at the top of the Drivers' Championship on 213 points, with Ferrari man Sebastian Vettel second on 189 points. And Adam, normally this kind of summer break is when things quieten down a little bit in Formula 1 as everyone takes a rest, but this has been one of the busiest so-called breaks that we've had in recent years. It's
been fantastic. I was thinking about naming everything that's happened, but there would be too much for me to say. But obviously the move about Daniel Ricciardo to Renault, that was a huge shock. Then Alonso's leaving Formula 1 at the end of the season, Sainz taking his seat at McLaren, and obviously the news about Force India going into administration, then they were rescued, and again that's the story that's dominating today in the F1 media, because they've actually launched a new name now. So for the rest of the season they'll be known as Racing Point Force India. So the Sahara Force India F1 team is no more, and they will now, from this weekend's Belgium Grand Prix onwards, be known for the rest of the season as Racing Point Force India.
So what implications does that have for the team, Adam? Is there any changes to the standings or anything like that?
Yes, big ramifications, because they've lost all their constructor points. So I'm sure the people at Williams will be delighted to see that they are now ninth in the standings with 4 points. So what a summer they've had. But no, so all of the points that Sahara Force India had, they have lost them, which just shows you how much money, though, this consortium, which is headed up by Lance Stroll's father Lawrence, does have. The fact they can afford to lose this amount of prize money. Good news in terms of the drivers for Esteban Ocon and Sergio Perez, that they still get to keep their points, because it would have been harsh on the drivers had their points been taken off. So yes, Force India, or Racing Point Force India, it's going to take a bit of use to saying that, but they're now bottom of the Constructors' Championship going into this weekend's Belgium Grand Prix. So all changed there.
And you made an interesting point there, highlighting Lawrence Stroll, his involvement in this takeover deal. The fact that they've changed the team's name already, they're willing to therefore take a big hit in terms of prize money, presumably with the fact that they're being deducted down to 0 points now in the Constructors' Championship. I dare say that's a bit of a signal of intent to the potential investment going into this team next season, Adam.
Yeah, very much could be. In the paddock, when they were setting them up, that was the first thing everybody was noticing, that, you know, where's all the Force India branding going? You know, it's just all pink at the moment, with their main sponsors BWT, the Austrian company, but there was nothing about Force India. So then speculation began to arise, and this name again, I understand that this is just going to be temporary and they're going to have a complete name change next season, so it won't be Force India Racing Point. Does seem a bit bizarre of a name change, to be honest, but I think with all the stuff with Vijay Mallya as well, they're just wanting to be known as a completely different entity. But you're right, you know, the fact they have lost all this prize money, Force India, does show how much money this consortium headed up by Lawrence Stroll does have, and it's going to be fascinating to watch over the next few years with that money how far they'll be able to go on the F1 grid.
Quite an interesting comment ahead of the race this weekend from Lance Stroll, who's of course at Williams at the moment. He said there's no guarantee that he will stay with Williams for the end of the season, Adam, but do you think that's him just playing some games in there? You know, he was saying comments like, I hope my dad takes me to this new team. I mean, come on, it's a given, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. We talked about it during the show, one of the previous shows during the summer break, that, you know, perhaps Lance Stroll could even be racing this weekend with Force India, Racing Point Force India. But obviously that's not the case this weekend. But yeah, you're right, it is only a matter of time. It's better for him to get used to the car as well, so when whoever he partners next season, he's had a bit of seat time as well. So I think it's better for Lance Stroll to go to Force India sooner rather than later. And it has ramifications for like Esteban Ocon. You know, he was expected to go to Renault. Now, Force India, it's rumoured that Sergio Perez is going to be more likely to stay on than Ocon. So could Ocon only be left at Williams? Obviously, he's got the links with Mercedes. And then that begs the question about George Russell, who'd been tipped as perhaps one of the Brits to go into the grid. Could he maybe go to Williams as well? Well, now that looks as if that could be out. So that's not ideal at the moment. So we'll see what happens.
And of course, another big story going into this race, Adam, is the news that Toro Rosso's Pierre Gasly is making the step up from within Red Bull's senior team to partner Max Verstappen next season. Of course, Toro Rosso is the kind of sister team of the whole Red Bull operations in Formula 1. So, Adam, were you surprised that it was Gasly that was announced as Daniel Ricciardo's replacement at that Red Bull team for 2019?
Well, it's the way Red Bull like to do things, isn't it? They've always been notoriously good at promoting junior talent that they've had. They'd bring a couple of drivers to Toro Rosso, then they'd promote them to the Red Bull team. You look at the success they've had over the years. Sebastian Vettel, recently Daniel Ricciardo. You've also had Max Verstappen too. So I wasn't surprised about Pierre Gasly. Personally, I would have liked to have saw Carlos Sainz in that seat. He'd been part of the Red Bull family. He'd been off to Renault for a season loan. Now he's joined McLaren, so not surprised about Gasly. Great move for Pierre Gasly. He's only had 1 year in Formula 1 as well. A lot of people were surprised that it took so long for him to actually get a seat in Formula 1, because he'd been doing well in junior categories for many years. He finally got his chance, and all of a sudden it's a quick rise into Formula 1, and it's going to be difficult for him to handle too, going up against one of the best drivers in the grid in Max Verstappen.
And the thing is as well, you mentioned there the fact that Gasly doesn't have much experience in Formula 1, but he's actually 2 years older than his future teammate Max Verstappen as well, which is quite interesting. So do you think that those two drivers will work well together at Red Bull next season? It's
an incredible statistic, isn't it, that the age between them is, the combined age is going to be 42. I just find that amazing. You know, people were tweeting it, and Pierre Gasly, you know, he's older than Max Verstappen. It's still so difficult to believe that Max Verstappen is just 20 years old. I think they should get on fairly well. I'm not expecting Pierre Gasly to go to Red Bull and rock the boat, if you like. I think it'll take him a wee bit of time to adapt to the Red Bull car. Obviously, he'll have the experience of the Honda Power Unit, which could be quite beneficial to him in understanding that compared to Max Verstappen. But they've known each other through junior categories, used to race when they were younger as well, so I think they know each other relatively well at the moment. So I think it could be a good partnership for Red Bull, especially if they're looking to perhaps build a team around Max Verstappen. I think Pierre Gasly will just be delighted that Red Bull have given him the opportunity to move into the race seat.
But surely he won't be delighted to just be a number 2 driver though, Adam, because Gasly's a very talented driver in his own right. So, I mean, what do you think he can realistically achieve there? Do you think he's maybe been given that drive on the understanding that you will absolutely be, you know, supporting Max Verstappen and no more? Because if I'm Pierre Gasly, I wouldn't be too keen on that.
Yeah, I think Pierre Gasly's done a superb job, especially in comparison to his teammate Brendan Hartley, for example, this year. You look at Pierre Gasly's performance in Bahrain, that 4th place was tremendous. And the last time out in Hungary as well, I think it was 6th he finished. So Pierre Gasly's had a couple of great performances, and you're right, he won't be wanting to go to Red Bull to play the number 2. But at the moment, you look at Red Bull's other competitors, Ferrari, Sebastian Vettel, number 1, Raikkonen, taking more of a number 2 role at the moment. Same with Valtteri Bottas. So I think Red Bull, they've handled the situation with Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen extremely well. But all of a sudden, there was times this season where it's not quite everything's been made to look as if it's been great all around, but I think Pierre Gasly will be there under the understanding not to play a number 2 role, because it's not the way Red Bull like to do things, but I do feel that Verstappen is going to be the team leader, and we know that because Red Bull have been building a team around Max Verstappen. You can kind of see that as well, so it'll be interesting to see how the partnership lines up.
And I'm just looking ahead to the race this weekend. One story I want to get your thoughts on: Lando Norris, he will be driving in first practice for McLaren, replacing Fernando Alonso. Do you think this is to suss out whether or not he can make the step up to a race seat alongside Carlos Sainz Jr. at McLaren next season?
Yeah, I think it's a massive opportunity for Lando Norris to get this time, and I do believe that this is a real opportunity for Lando Norris to really stake his claim to getting that second McLaren seat alongside Carlos Sainz Jr. Stoffel Van Dorn, he's under a huge amount of pressure. Sometimes I think unfairly, because you've got to remember the guy he's up against, Fernando Alonso, and he's had this chassis issue which was fixed last time out in Hungary, and he was in the points just behind his teammate Fernando Alonso. So perhaps in the second half of the season I do expect Van Dorn to be a lot more competitive, and he has to be because his Formula 1 career's on the line here. But for Lando Norris, he has a fantastic opportunity taking Alonso's seat in first practice for McLaren, and I think that it will be a real opportunity for McLaren to gauge whether Lando Norris is ready, because it looked as if in the early stages of the season it was almost set in stone. If Alonso was to go, Norris probably would go to McLaren, but then all of a sudden people were saying, well, perhaps his Formula 2 performances of recent haven't been as great as people were predicting, and it may be an extra year and racing elsewhere before making the step up to Formula 1 would be more beneficial for both parties.
Adam, how important is this race, not just for Sebastian Vettel, but for Ferrari as well? Because this time last season, they were in this very similar position to 2018. They were in the title fight, but then they fell away. So what can they do differently this year?
Yeah, those final 2 races in Germany and Hungary, really disappointment for Sebastian Vettel. Should have been 50 out of 50, obviously crashed out while leading in Germany, got unlucky in qualifying in Hungary with the rain because Ferrari were fastest there, so he's lost some big points to Lewis Hamilton, who's won both of those races. You mentioned last year Vettel went into the summer break ahead, so he's playing catch up now. How will he handle that situation? You talked about how last season what happened, which was just disastrous really for Sebastian Vettel in those final few races. Singapore and obviously the car failures in Japan as well didn't help. So it's a massive race for Sebastian Vettel, and Ferrari came so close to winning at Spa. I don't think they've won there since 2009 when Kimi Raikkonen won. But they came so close last year, and a lot of people predicted Spa to be comfortable for Mercedes last time out in Belgium. But Ferrari came very close, so I think this is probably their best opportunity for Ferrari to take a Belgian win this decade.
This decade? Oh, jeez. I mean, that's a stat in itself, though, isn't it? I mean, the fact that they've gone so long without a win here.
Yep, 2009, so it's been a while, and as I said, they came so close last year. Not many people are predicting that, so yeah, I think the cars are a lot more competitive this season, so I believe Ferrari will be on Mercedes' pace.
Alright, now MotoGP is also in action this weekend as the riders head to Silverstone for the 12th round of the season. Now Marc Marquez is top of the standings on 201 points, but he's now gone 2 races without a win. So can he bounce back this weekend? Well, joining us on pole position to talk more about this is MotoGP reporter Neil Morrison. And Neil, thanks very much for joining us here on the show. How important is it that Marquez doesn't lose any momentum now with us in the second half of the season?
Yeah, I think it's important for Mark to kind of, get more of a winning group back on proceedings, because he dominated the start of the year. But as you mentioned there, he's gone 2 races without winning. Kind of appears that 2 of the Factory Ducati guys that he's coming up against week in, week out are in a really, really strong shape, and they've got a couple of really good tracks coming up for them as well, Silverstone being one of them this weekend. But honestly, I think Marquez has been so strong this year everywhere he's gone. I think he's finished first or second in every single race up until 3 weeks ago in Brno, and even then he was third. So even if he's having a bad day, I mean, the lowest he's kind of finished is still on the podium. So, he'll be keen to get back to winning ways, but I don't think you could say the past 2 races, the fact he hasn't won is in any way dramatic.
That being said, Neil, this time last year at Silverstone, his Repsol Honda broke down because of an engine problem, and he hasn't finished on the podium here since 2014 as well. So is this maybe a track that he just doesn't seem to like for whatever reason?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of factors there. Last year he obviously had the engine issue, which was a strange mechanical, especially for Honda. They really pride themselves on the strength and the longevity of their engines. But if that didn't happen, I really think he would have been difficult to beat. He was fighting for the race win here in 2015, and then he crashed. That was a wet race. And also he was up in the kind of podium fight in 2016 as well. So he's always been here. It's maybe not one of his favourite tracks that he can always bank a win on. But I still think he's going to be one of the guys to beat come Sunday. But he's got a pretty strong cast of guys that are going to be challenging him for sure. But I definitely think it would be foolish to rule him out.
Hi Neil, Adam here. One man that's going into this race in form is Ducati's Jorge Lorenzo, who won that thrilling race last time out in Austria. You mentioned the Ducatis liking this track and being favourites, but would you say Jorge Lorenzo's probably the favourite for this weekend?
Yeah, possibly, yeah. I mean, Lorenzo loves this track. He's got a really silky, smooth riding style, carries lots of corner speed. It was quite difficult for him last year, which was his first for Ducati, to really adapt his riding style to the bike because, it doesn't really handle as well as the bike that he had been previously on for 9 seasons. But it seems that, Ducati's made big strides forward in the last 18 months really. And it seems that a variety of styles can now thrive on that bike. So Lorenzo's certainly been a big beneficiary of that. And yeah, he's a really strong record here. He's won a couple of occasions. He's in great form. There was a test last weekend at Misano in Italy, and Lorenzo was on lap record pace there. So yeah, I think he's definitely going to be a guy to beat. And it's just such a shame that he had terrible opening year, because had it not been for the first 3 really lousy races at the start of the season, he would be right there in the championship fight with Marquez.
Yeah, nevertheless, though, how good do you think it is for MotoGP to have a competitive Jorge Lorenzo now?
Oh yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's great to see, because in terms of talent, Jorge is right up there with Mark, and yeah, you kind of need. I mean, Mark is such a sterling rider that basically you need anyone with kind of similar levels of talent to be on the game. And last year was a year of adaptation for Lorenzo. Obviously, switching from Yamaha to Ducati, it took basically 3/4 of a season to get up to his normal levels. And yeah, I think he, when the conditions are right, he's a guy that can give Marquez a run every single week. So yeah, it's definitely important for the series. But you've got another couple of guys there. It was Lorenzo's teammate, it was causing Marquez troubles last year. Lots of occasions that's happened this year as well. So yeah, it's good for Lorenzo. It's good for the sport that Lorenzo's back. And it should be interesting to see how he does in the last couple of races of the season, because he's confident that they now have a setup which can challenge at every race track. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
And it was announced earlier this year that Lorenzo will be teaming up with Marc Marquez at Honda next year. Do you think Ducati and even maybe Lorenzo may regret their decision to part ways at the end of this season?
Yeah, I think Lorenzo and Ducati will be, maybe cursing the decision is too strong. Certainly Ducati will be, I think. And Lorenzo seems to be quite excited about joining Marquez at Repsol Honda. Obviously that's the most successful team in the series. It's the most well-resourced team. It has the biggest budget, great prestige as well. I think at this moment in time, the Ducati is definitely the best bike in the grid. And the Honda needs to be ridden in a very specific way, and that way is how Marc Marquez rides it, how Cal Crutchlow rides it, and that is a very, very different, drastically different way to how Jorge Lorenzo rides a motorcycle. So, yeah, I think at this moment in time, he's probably not regretting moving to Honda. But maybe after the first test, the second test next year, he might be regretting it.
And you mentioned Lorenzo's current teammate Andrea Dovizioso earlier on. He was predicted to challenge for the title this year after such a great run with Ducati last season. So where do you think it's gone wrong from this year so far?
Yeah, it's difficult to say, because in terms of competitiveness, I would say Dovizioso was even more competitive than he was last year, because pretty much every single race that we've gone to this year, Dovizioso has been, right on the pace. I think there was maybe only one race of the 11 that we did so far. We were a little bit off. That was in Germany. But the difference really is that Marquez this year and Honda have taken a big step forward, and they're just there, fighting for race wins every single weekend. There's no let up. And Dovizioso, I think, on a few occasions was just taken aback by that, and there was a few mistakes that crept into his game in the first kind of third of the year, and since then he's been playing catch-up. And when you're playing catch-up, there's occasions where you just have to risk a little bit more to try and make ground back. And there was an instance in the race in Barcelona, for example, in mid-June, when he could see Marquez ahead, and he knew that he had to beat him at that track because that was one of his favourite tracks. He put it all on the line and ended up crashing, so that really cost him. And I think both Ducatis have the potential to be right in the middle of a title fight with Marquez, but sadly, through one reason or another, they're not really there.
And Neil, one team I want to get your thoughts on is Yamaha, who have not won a race in over a year now. Would you say they're in a bit of a crisis at the moment, especially after what happened in qualifying at Austria?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's kind of two ways to look at it. One is that they're in a crisis. They've gone, I think, 21 races now without winning a race in MotoGP, which is kind of unprecedented in the four-stroke era, which kind of stretches all the way back to 2002. It's a run, I think, that weighs quite heavily on the team, on the factory, on riders. And, certainly in Austria, that was always going to be a difficult track for them because of the layout and because of the issues they have were really exposed by that layout. In that respect, you could say that they are in a bit of crisis. And you do get the impression that internally the team is kind of running around almost like headless chickens. They're not really quite sure of the cure. The riders have been speaking of a similar issue with the electronics of the bike, with the acceleration, the lack of acceleration, for about, 16 months now. And there really hasn't been any significant improvement at all in that department. So it's definitely been very frustrating. But on the other hand, you look at the championship and you can see that Valentino Rossi is second in the championship. Up until 3 weeks ago, Maverick Vinales, his teammate, was third in the championship. The Movistar Yamaha team was leading the team's championship. So I think in some respects, calling it a crisis would be overstating it, because the bike is, let's say, 95% there. The chassis is really good. It handles well. But to go that last 5% to really challenge Honda and Ducati consistently is quite difficult. And that's really where they've fallen down at the moment. But I wouldn't be surprised if Rossi finished second overall in this year's championship. Does that represent a crisis for the factory? Well, I don't know. But if this winless streak stretches on another while, it's only going to weigh heavier on the kind of factory bosses. And it'd be interesting to see if there's any internal shake-up in that team ahead of 2019.
And the home fans at Silverstone, they'll be hoping for a good result for the Brits on the grid. Earlier today, HRC announced a new contract extension for Cal Crutchlow. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a good move. It's a good move for Cal. It's a good move for HRC. Cal obviously is riding the LCR Honda team, which is a satellite squad, just outside the Repsol squad. But he's on a bike that's very, very similar to Marquez. There's one or two small changes, subtle changes in the kind of the hardware that they use, but more or less he's on a similar machine. He's basically on a factory contract now and has been there, not the test rider, but he does a lot of the donkey work when they go to tests between race weekends, and even during race weekends he'll maybe be trying setups or parts for factory guys in Repsol squads. So he's been good at that. It's clear that Honda value his work ethic, value his feedback. I think his testing feedback has been quite impressive, and they've been taking that on board a lot. And they're aware that in the past few years, essentially Marquez has been the only guy that's been able to go fast on that bike, and having someone like Crutchlow, who has a similar style, but is more representative of, I think, a general rider, rather than this exotic talent that no one else can really replicate, like Marquez. Having someone like that is quite valuable. And you just have to look at the results this year. I mean, Cal's been pretty much competitive everywhere we've gone. I think he's been capable of top six finishes everywhere we've gone, and the occasional podium. And of course, he scored that win in Argentina back in April. So I I think it's a good move for Cal, more stability, and good move for HRC.
Yeah, you mentioned the start of the year for Cal Crutchlow. Do you think he'll be slightly disappointed then, in the sense that he's not been able to be more consistent, especially after that great start to the year where he was leading the championship?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I think I don't have the championship standings just at hand, but I think he's in the top 6, top 7 in the championship. Had he not had a few crashes, he would obviously be possibly even third above both of the Ducatis, and that would have looked looked good. But I think he takes a lot of heart from the fact that he's consistent now, very, very consistent, and a bad day isn't running around at the back end of the top 10. Even on a bad day this year, he's kind of been in the 5 for at least a podium position. He does seem to consistently run into similar issues with that bike, which I think are a little bit frustrating for him. But I think we can look at this season as a whole and say that he's riding probably as well as he's ever ridden. And I think if you look at the race 2 weeks ago in Austria, I mean, obviously the top 3 the guys in the podium, Lorenzo, Marquez and Dovizioso, they were kind of in a class of their own, but Crutchlow was comfortably the best of the rest all weekend. And that's not bad going at all.
Yeah. And the other Brits, Bradley Smith and Scott Redding, what do you think we can expect from them this weekend?
Well, it's tough to say, really. I mean, neither of them have been having a particularly great season. Both guys know that they are not going to be racing for their current teams next year. The fact they're not going to be racing full-time in MotoGP next year. It's tough to say, really. I think if you look at the Scott Redding, Aprilia, the team that he rides for, and the factory that he rides for, they've been beset by a lot of mechanical issues, mechanical gremlins, and his frustrations really spilled over. The last time out at Austria, he finished something like 55 seconds off the race winner. It's a real nightmare of a week, just beset by continual mechanical gremlins and not being very competitive. So he kind of went on this expletive-laden, I don't know what you would call it, really, just outburst, against kind of his team, against the factory. I don't think that really went down so well with the Aprilia engineers. But, he was kind of talking today. They had a test at Misano last week. They had a new engine, which they're going to have for Saturday. He said it's like a different bike. When it has that engine fitted, it makes it a more manageable bike to ride, both when he's on the throttle, when he's off the throttle. Scott is a really, really strong rider here. I think if you look at Scott throughout his career, consistency's been one of those trouble areas. But when he does go to tracks that he's good at, he can be very competitive, capable of top 10 finishes. Silverstone is definitely one of those tracks. He won here back in 2013 when he was in the Moto2 class. So, if engine, it's as good as he says it is, the new engine, and if he has that available to him this weekend, then, I think he could be hopeful of maybe top 12, which could be okay. And for Bradley Smith, I mean, it's been a difficult second season for his team and factory, for KTM, and they really kicked on. They, made a real impression last year in their first season. They came in and were really running with, factories that have been on the MotoGP grid for years and years and years, and running with them by the end of the season, kind of getting top 10 finishes, which is quite impressive. They've struggled a little bit. A lot of factories have moved on this year, made a little bit of a step forward, and KTM haven't quite made that step. So I think if Bradley can finish in the points this weekend, that would be seen as a good ride. But whether he can breach the top 10, that remains to be seen. But you have to take account. I mean, I'm standing here, Silverstone now. It's raining quite well, on and off. Rain is forecast for Sunday. You look at Crutchlow, you look at Scott Redding. I mean, they're really, really strong wet weather riders. So if the conditions are a bit up in the air, I mean, who's to say what could happen? You really wouldn't bet against Crutchlow standing on the podium. You wouldn't even bet against Redding maybe finishing in the top 8 if it is wet, because, he really is a strong wet weather rider. So, should be interesting to see what happens.
And Neil, just finally, you mentioned the weather there and the challenges that might face, but what about this new track surface at Silverstone as well? How do you think that's going to affect the riders?
Yeah, it's interesting, because obviously there was new track surface laid here, I think, back in February, maybe it was early March. it was supposed to smooth it out, because obviously this track's being used a lot by cars and Formula One, and you normally find that when Formula One uses the surface, it does get quite bumpy just because of the wind force that those cars are putting onto it. Basically the new surface was put down to try and eradicate a lot of those bumps. But I think Lewis Hamilton said earlier this year when he was here for the British Grand Prix, he said like this is the bumpiest surface he'd ever been on. Spoken to a couple of riders today who've been out on their bicycles, riding around the track, having a look, checking it out, and they say that it seems like it could be worse than it was last year. So, it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, it's going to be a challenge to adapt to that. But I think it always was bumpy in the past. It's just the case that they haven't really remedied that. So, guys come to Silverstone. I think they expect something like this. They were hoping for something a bit better, I think, this season. But maybe it won't have materialised.
Great stuff, Neil. Thanks very much for joining us on the show. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us here on Pole Position.
All right, no worries. Yeah, thanks for your time. Cheers.
MotoGP reporter Neil Morrison there, speaking to us on RockSport Radio. Now, the British Touring Car Championship is back this weekend, and it's taking place at Knockhill as well for the 8th round of the season. And joining us on Pole Position to look ahead to the race, I'm delighted to say Stuart Gray joins us once again here on the show. He's our Events and Marketing Director at Knockhill. And Stuart, you must really be looking forward to hosting this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening to you all. It's our big one of the year. The whole team are on the event year round, and in the last sort of 3 months after the Superbikes back in July, the focus was on touring cars, and glad to say all the teams have arrived. We've had a week long of support class testing with our Porsches and Formula 4s and all that kind of stuff. Everyone under the lap record, new surface as well, and we'll see the first of the touring car action with free practice on Saturday morning. So it's all systems go for Scotland's biggest motorsport event of the year.
And Stuart, could you just take us on a lap around Knockhill and just tell us about the challenges that all the drivers will face this weekend?
I don't think there's a circuit like it in the world, with the fact that over 1.3 miles there's 104 feet of descent and climb. There's 3 blind corners. There's curbs that the drivers love to use, and which often pitch the cars into 30-degree lifts-offs with the inside wheels. The undulations, the fact that the fans are so close. Toughest step is a huge challenge. The chicane is one of the most filmed corners probably in the world, one of the most recognisable. And you then got Clark Corner, which is one of the prime overtaking places, and the hairpin, slow corner, but it's crucial because it leads on to the main straight. So it's short, it's undulating, it's demanding, it's exciting, it's a real thrill a second to drive. No time to rest, but lots of overtaking places as well. So it's got everything. So we wouldn't change the track, and a lot of people ask us, would we lengthen it? Would we widen it? That kind of thing. But basically, each race on Sunday is going to be 30 laps long. If you had a racetrack 3 times longer, a race would be 10 laps. So that we would be denying the fans 2/3 of the action by having a longer lap. So we like the short lap time. It gives more for the fans, more thrill for the drivers, and it's full on from start to finish.
And Stuart, there's going to be 3 Scottish faces on the BTCC grid, with Aidan Moffat driving the Laser Tools Racing Mercedes A-Class. We've also got Rory Brutcher and Glenn Geddy both driving the AMD Tuning MG6 GT car as well, so it's good to have a bit more Scottish representation on the grid this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had Scots on the grid probably ever since touring cars started, a lot of very famous names over the years, and as you say, to have 3 32 as teammates, and Glenn and Rory have been teammates in the past in GT racing, so they know each other well. They have a similar driving style, so both will benefit from each other in terms of car setup and dialing them in to the track. And Aidan's fast anywhere. So plenty of home support, 31 touring cars on track, 3 of them are Scots. There's international drivers, there's Irish drivers and European drivers. It's full of quality from the front of the grid to the back, and with 3 races, that's 90 laps of touring car action on Sunday.
And Stuart, it's going to be busy as well at Knockhill. So how big a boost will the Scottish drivers get driving in front of the home crowd here?
Well, it's a kind of psychological. There's no physical reason, because all the top drivers will get dialed into the track within 10 laps. So it's not track knowledge that's the advantage. It's just the support, the Scottish flags, the saltires, all that kind of stuff. And I think any Formula One driver says that there's always a lift for their home event. There's added pressure as well, but if the driver's experienced, they can turn that pressure into positive pressure rather than negative. And there's no reason why the 3 of them shouldn't go well.
And just finally, Stuart, what else can we look out for at Knockhill this weekend?
It's 2 days of the best racing in Europe. Saloon cars, there's Porsche Carrera Cup, which is the fastest one-make series in Europe. These cars can do a kind of 195 miles an hour and are sensational around the track. F4 has got budding Formula One drivers, some of which are already backed by Red Bull. And Mick Stewart, son, the multiple MotoGP champion, his son is already in F4, is pursuing a 4-wheel career rather than 2-wheel like his dad. But there's drivers in that class who will be in F1 in 3-4 years' time, and they're cutting their teeth in F4. And Ginettas are great fun as well. There's a lot of sports cars, so it's 2 days of probably the best mix of racing in Europe, and that's why touring cars is so good.
Great stuff. Stuart, thanks very much for joining us on the show. Always great to catch up about what's happening up at Knockhill with you here on RockSport Radio.
Great, you're welcome.
Stuart Gray from Knockhill there. Now, let's change tracks for just a moment and get the half-time report from the Europa League qualifying playoffs first leg between Rangers and SC Youfa from Ibrox with Bob Smith. And we'll hear from Bob just in a few moments' time here on RockSport Radio. Adam, just before we move on to our next guest on the show, just give us a quick reminder of the standings in British Touring Car Championship and just how things are shaping up ahead of Knockhill.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a fantastic battle this weekend because obviously there's only a few more rounds to go. Knockhill, after Knockhill, just 2 more rounds to go, or still 6 races to go after Knockhill. But nevertheless, Colin Turkington goes into Knockhill, 220 points. He's 4 ahead of Tom Ingram on 216. Then there's a gap down to Ashley Sutton, who had a good weekend in Rockingham, getting that second in race 1 and then winning race 2. He's in 188. Jack Goff's in 176. So is Matt Neal as well. And you've got Adam Morgan, Tom Chilton, Josh Cook, all in the 160s, as well as Andrew Jordan. So, you know, the British touring cars, because there is 3 races a day, anything can happen, can't it, in one round? And all of a sudden you can be, you know, maybe 30 points off, and by the time the series leaves, you're back in contention. So it's going to be a fantastic weekend at Knockhill, and as we heard from Stuart, they're great to have racing in Scotland as well, and it should be a great day out.
Yeah, definitely. And Adam, one of the interesting things for me about this season's championship is the fact that, you know, a lot of the narrative has been around this is the changing of the old guard. It's the young guys coming through this season. It's like your Jack Goff, Sam Tordoff, these guys all coming through to the fore now. But even at that, it's still not quite happened yet, Adam. There's life in some of the veterans on the grid. Colin Turkington, he's been a name on the BTCC calendar for so many years now. He's still top of the standings there, as you mentioned. But some of those young guns, they're coming through nicely now as well.
They certainly are. I mean, Colin Turkington, you know, at the start, you're right, a lot was made about this as a changing of the guard. The younger generation are coming through, because Colin Turkington, OK, got second place in the very first race of the season at Brands Hatch Indy Circuit, but then his next two results weren't great. Had a 9th place, Donington Park, he only had 1 points finish, and that was 10th, and it was really Thruxton where it changed around from him, got a couple of second places and a 5th place, that got him back in championship contention all of a sudden. So yeah, Turkington leading the way from Tom Ingram, and then you've got people like Ashley Sutton and Jack Goff, as you mentioned. So, you know, the younger guns, they'll be out to prove a point that they can take it to all these experienced pros that have been racing in the British touring cars for so long. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend at Knockhill. And of course you have the success ballast as well and different things like that. So yeah, looking forward to this weekend's race, and we'll see what happens, and hopefully the Scots as well, they can have a couple of decent results.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were hoping to chat with Bob Smith there about the half-time report from Ibrox, but you can catch the full-time report with Ian Martin on Rockstock and Barrel from 9 o'clock tonight. Now, as Stuart Gray from Knockhill mentioned there, it's not just the BTCC in action this weekend. There are other categories racing too, including the Porsche Carrera Cup. Now, I'm delighted to say that joining us on pole position to talk more about this is Carrera Cup reporter Sam Lloyd. And Sam, thanks for joining us on the show. Could you tell us a little bit more about this series and what we can expect?
Good evening to you. Lovely to have you on the show this evening ahead of what is undoubtedly one of the biggest highlights in the calendar. We love, fans and drivers alike, to make the annual pilgrimage to Knockhill, Fife's roller coaster ride circuit. Yeah, but the Porsche Carrera Cup, well, it just goes from strength to strength. It's a one-make series. It's the fastest single-mark GT racing championships in the UK. And it's a very, very interesting playing field because all the cars are identical. They're the very powerful Porsche 911 GT3 Cup cars. So it really is about the talent and the speed of the drivers to invariably try and bag those points. There are 3 categories. The Pro, which are kind of the up-and-coming, really talented racing, shall we say, in this country. Then you've got Pro-Am, a little bit slower but still highly competitive. And then you've got the Am categories, which are the gentlemen who, you know, use it as a bit of a, they're the gentleman racers, as we say, but they're still as competitive as the pro drivers. And, you know, as some of the guys on your show have already mentioned, we're reaching a crucial part of the series now with everyone trying to keep on being consistent, bagging those points, because everyone wants to lift the silverware at the end of the season. But it's a very, very competitive championship. It's just grown in strength over the 16 years or so, and it really does create some of the champions of the future in terms of those drivers who aspire to go the sports car route rather than single-seaters and indeed F1. But these are the real basis of sports car drivers and the way that they can progress. So everyone sees this Porsche pyramid as a fantastic stepping stone to go on to great things, such as competing at the iconic Le Mans 24-hour race, or indeed the FIA World Endurance Championship. And we, of course, had the UK leg just last weekend. I was there at Silverstone. But yes, a really, really exciting championship.
So Sam, with the cars all being similar, what can the drivers and the teams do to try and get an advantage out there on track?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because, of course, it is one of the support races of the TOCA package with the BTCC, which you've spoken at great length. And, we've missed a couple of rounds because there was a European leg where we went to Italy to the fantastic Monza circuit. But it's all about the drivers speaking to their respective teams and engineers to try and get the setup of the car absolutely right. But the beauty about this championship is the nature and the diversity of circuits that we go to. And you look at Knockhill, which, you know, I say this with the highest regard and respect, is like a roller coaster, challenge swoops and crests. It's very unpredictable, the unique track. It's one of those circuits where, forgive me, I pack everything imaginable from, because I know I'm going to experience all kinds of weather this weekend, which is going to face us. So it's all about tyre choice. It's about the setup of the car. It's working with the mechanics and the engineers to try and get the setup absolutely right for each track to try and keep on claiming the silverware. And interestingly, our last round, obviously for BTCC, was Rockingham, but it was Snetterton for the Porsche Carrera Cup drivers. And speaking to all the guys and girls, half the grid have never, ever been to Knock Hill before. So they've had a big testing day yesterday at the Scottish circuit. So there's even more homework that needs to be done for the guys and girls who've never, ever been to Fife before. But it is about, it's a level playing field, as you mentioned. It's about the setup, getting the tyres right, boxing clever, and having all the most successful package and obviously a fast driver in the hope that they can obviously go on and get some podium places.
And Sam, just finally, who should we be keeping an eye out for this weekend?
Oh, well, listen, it can get more exciting. You talk about the likes of Colin Turkington leading the BTCC. Well, in the Porsche Carrera Cup, it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but there really is everything to play for. Dino Samparelli, this Italian hotshot from Bristol, he leads by just 4 points ahead of this fantastically talented Cypriot driver, Teo Elenas. Now, interesting, just to give you an insight into how competitive this championship is, so far we've had 6 different winners in 2018 in the pro category. It's fantastic to see so many different drivers at the top of the podium, but with everything to play for and 4 points and a number of really talented individuals kicking at their heels ahead of Samparelli and Elenas, they all know that this weekend is going to be absolutely crucial for success. 2 races in total on Sunday, that all-important qualifying on Saturday, and bagging those crucial points is even more significant at this point of the season.
Great stuff, Sam. Thanks very much for joining us, and hopefully we can check in again here on Pole Position for an update on the Porsche Carrera Cup. And that's Sam Lloyd joining us there on RockSport Radio. Now, let's take a look at the World Rally Championship as Ott Tanak took his second win in his many events at the German Rally last weekend. And joining us on Pole Position to talk more about this is, of course, rally expert David Halley. And David, what a performance that was by Ott Tanak.
Absolutely. Confidence in the car. Out very start, and nobody could touch him. Sebastian got close on Saturday, but suffered a puncture which put him back. But yes, Tanak was absolutely untouchable yet again.
And David, were you surprised by just how dominant he was in the end, though?
No. I've said from the outset of the season that once Ott gets comfortable in that car, he's going to be very hard to beat, and it's proven again on 2 different surfaces, from the gravel last time to tarmac this time. He's really got the handle on that car.
And David, Sébastien Ogier dropped just 2 points in the end to championship leader Thierry Neuville after finishing in 4th place, winning the power stage, of course, which reduced that deficit. David, I feared the worst when he hit that rock on the Panzerplatte stage, because it was that kind of... It was a tight left-hander, big rock there on the inside, but when you watch the footage back, it seems like just a clip and no more, but it's had a huge impact.
Absolutely, and if you recall, year it was Thierry Neuville who had a problem on the Panzerplatte and actually pulled a wheel off the car, which derailed his championship chances. Sebastian was a little bit distracted. Something was going on in the car prior to losing the plot slightly at that corner. A very slight variation of line. Nicked the tyre, down it goes. They do get a warning in the car when they have a puncture. They don't have to wait until it's tearing the wing off it. They do get a pressure warning inside the car, and he chose to stop almost immediately and change the tyre. He changed the tyre in 1 minute and 45 seconds or thereabouts, and actually only lost 1 minute 40 over the length of the stage. That put him back to 8th place, and it looked like it was game over, not just for the event, but possibly for the championship. But as Sunday dawned, a lot of things happened, and yes, he got it up there.
He did, and the thing is as well, David, it's 23 points. He trails Neuville in the standings, 4 rounds to go, and he hasn't won for a while as well, Corsica, last time he took a victory. So, I mean, dare I say the secret for not just Ogier but M-Sport here is just not to panic?
Yes, it's all about not panicking. We know that the Toyota, the engine that they brought to Finland and obviously beyond is proving to be very powerful and reliable. So they're able to use a lot of power on some of the longer stages in Germany. The the Fords and the Hyundais were on the rev limiter, but the Toyota wasn't. They've got a little bit more power, can pull a taller gear, so they were gaining a bit on some of the very, very fast sections.
Hi David, Adam here. There was disappointment for Ogier's teammate Elfyn Evans as well. After doing so well on Friday, that must have been big disappointment for him.
Yes, he found a rock where he didn't expect. He shouldn't have been where he was. He went offline very slightly, bit of understeer because the gravel that had been pulled out by the cars in front, the car didn't to go round the corner. As he aimed off into a field, 9 times out of 10, get into the field, you'll handbrake it round and come back on. But in the verge, there was a rock, and it destroyed the left front suspension of the car.
And Neuville, as we mentioned, finishing in second place, but things weren't easy for him either.
He was struggling to keep pace with Sebastian and Ott. His car just didn't seem to have the pace. He didn't have the pace. If Sebastian hadn't had that puncture, then I think my top 3 would have been about right. But unfortunately, a rock destroyed my chance of getting the result almost right.
Yeah, and Esa-Pekka Lappi, he secured third. That's a great result for him.
Absolutely superb result for him, and it brings Toyota right into play in the Manufacturers' Championship. Getting 2 cars into the top 3 makes a heck of a difference, and they nearly had the full set, but Latvala had a transmission failure on the Sunday morning and had to park it up.
Yeah, I mean, David, there were quite a number of cars that failed to make it to the end as well. Danny Sordo's one driver I want to get your thoughts on, because that was his first outing since back in Portugal. And you'll be disappointed with that because he managed to win 2 stages on Saturday as well.
Again, he was very quick. He was up there. He had one small error on Sunday morning. Again, gravel on the outside of a corner. It got away from him slightly. He drove through the vineyards, ended up looking like an early harvest machine with grapes all over the car, but he did a lot of damage to the front offside of the car, and as a consequence, he was not able to complete all the stages.
And Jari-Matti Latvala, Toyota man, who also failed to finish. A disappointment for him as well.
He didn't have a great Friday. He was getting it all together on Saturday. He was very much more comfortable in the car, and the Toyotas were all looking very strong, but he rounded a corner on Sunday, selected a gear, and there was nothing there for him. It just ground to a halt with a lot of very expensive noises.
and David, I felt a bit sorry for Mads Osberg as well, because he did so well finishing second the last time out in Finland. What we talked about before was whether the newfound pace on gravel could be transferred to tarmac, and it didn't seem to be there. He was holding his own, but it was nowhere near as quick as it had been in Finland. So whatever they found at the front of the car to make the front of the car behave on the gravel just didn't seem to work particularly well on the tarmac of Germany. Craig Breen, I don't know what that man needs to get a break. On the Friday, he was up there, he was doing really, really well, and in the middle of one of the stages, he got a rain shower. Nobody else got a rain shower at all. He got torrential rain in the middle of a stage, and it just put him back. And then he had a further incident on Elfyn Evans' corner later on. And just finally, David, one driver I want to get your thoughts on, because we mentioned him on the show last week, Timo Suhonen, credit to him after that 5th place finish. Absolutely. He knew he had a learning job to do. He didn't push too hard. He was learning the car. There was a couple of wee mistakes, but he got away with them. Where he had the mistake, he managed to get the car handbrake round and back onto the track without doing any damage, and just hung in there. And to finish right behind Seb was a very, very good result. He is a star for the future. Great stuff, David. Pleasure as always to chat all things rally with you here on Pole Position. No problem at all. We'll do it again soon, chaps. Rally expert David Halley there. Now, it's a car that's synonymous with 007, and now Aston Martin are recreating the special Goldfinger DB5 in a very limited run. Now, earlier in the week, our Drive Time presenter Alex Horsburgh was joined by commercial director at the Aston Martin Works, Paul Spires, who told us a little bit more about the reissue of this classic car.
Well, the DB5 from Goldfinger must be one of, if not the most iconic motor vehicles ever to be manufactured. So we kind of came up with the idea that wouldn't it be great fun for those ladies and gentlemen that perhaps had the dinky toy back in the 1960s that are now kind of my age, kind of north of 50.
Yeah, same here.
And to be able to buy, a big dinky toy, a full-size car that works, that's got the simulated guns and the smoke and all that kind of good stuff, we thought would be a terrific thing and a real icon and something we could all be very proud of.
Always nice to see a car manufacturer try something different, Adam, but this is going to be a very costly purchase for any potential buyer. But what I really like as well, Adam, is the fact that Aston Martin have had that long-standing partnership with the film as well. They kind of go hand in hand now.
Yeah, they certainly do, and what a fantastic chat that was with Alex, and obviously Aston Martin, as you mentioned, with James Bond as well, so just very expensive indeed, but certainly a fantastic chat that Alex had the other day.
Absolutely. Now it's time for a bit of this.
Final lap on pole position on RockSport Radio.
There you go, Adam. You've got a new sweeper and everything, so the pressure is really on this week as you tell us 6 stories from the world of motorsport this week in just 60 seconds. This is always one of my favourite features here on Pole Position. And Adam, you managed to win last week, so let's see if you can make it 2 from 2 this time, because your time starts now.
Formula 1 could delay the introduction of new engines in order to attract new manufacturers to the sport. The planned rule changes are set to take place in 2021, but Ross Brawn believes they could be better waiting. Haas team principal Gunther Steiner has revealed that Antonio Ferrucci will remain part of the team's driver programme despite his 4-race ban from Formula 2. The 20-year-old also had his contract terminated with F2 team Trident after he drove into his teammate at Silverstone. Mick Schumacher won his second Formula 3 race of the season after taking victory in race 2 at Silverstone last weekend. The son of 7-time F1 world champion Michael Schumacher has now won a race in each of the last 2 events after he won at Spa earlier this month. History will be made this weekend as the first ever night race in the DTM will be held at Misano. In addition, 2-time Paralympic champion Alex Zanardi will make his series debut driving an adapted BMW M4. MotoGP rider Alvaro Bautista has announced he will leave the championship for 2019. The Spaniard will move to World Superbikes next year, joining the Patria Ducati team alongside Chaz Davis. And finally, we wish IndyCar driver Robert Wickens a speedy recovery. The Canadian driver remains in a stable condition following surgery after a huge crash during Sunday's race at Pocono.
Oh, give you that no more, Adam. There you go. What's that? Is that 2 for 2 or 3
yeah,
for 3?
time's perfection. I got that nice sweeper as a prize, didn't I? So I'm hoping for something big next week, Andy. What have you got in store?
More, I don't know. Right, well, I'll tell you what, I'll let you know on the show next week. Yeah, and credit to you, Adam, because that's a good little run you're getting there. A bit of momentum now,
Yeah, it's all about momentum, motorsport, isn't it? Can I make it a hat-trick? That's the big question.
Yeah, that's it. Psychological advantage, as well. That's the big one in motorsport, isn't it?
Certainly is, yes. But that final story, terrible accident for Robert Wickens.
Yes.
And we really do wish him all the best, and hopefully he'll be back racing sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. It's always sad when any driver in motorsport has a nasty accident, so absolutely wish him all the very best. And unfortunately, that's all we've got time for here on Pole Position this week, but we'll be back from 8 o'clock Thursday night to do it all again. My thanks to Adam, to our guests, and to you for listening, and stick around for Ian Martin coming up next on RockSport Radio.
Love music, live sport. Pole Position with Andy Alston and Adam Todd on RockSport Radio.